Okay, so what I'm going to be doing is going through JFK's inaugural address, um, because that is one of the texts we have to cover. An inaugural address is a president's first speech once they're sworn in. It happens literally moments later, and often its purpose is to outline the president's vision or the president's plan of action for the country going forward. Historically, and we have to look at the context of this speech, JFK became president at a time of great social change. He became president at a time of great social tension as a result of the Cold War. And he was seen as the first new president with a new perspective since the Second World War, because he was much younger um, than the president that preceded him. And so when we look at that factors, it really guides the voice that he presents, because he is the voice of a president, and it is the presidential voice. But more importantly, it's a voice of the message that he's trying to produce, which is that of change, and that of a new beginning. So, how he does that is he uses things like inclusive pronouns. He will consistently invite the audience into the conversation with him. He's talking about we. We need to do this. We dare not forget. You know, he uses those inclusive pronouns so that when he talks to the audience, he's actually making them part of the issue and part of his plan for the future. He One thing he uses quite a lot of is antithesis, which is using contrasting statements to highlight a point. So, for example, um, symbolizing an end as well as a beginning, symbolizing a renewal as well as change. It's that idea of contrasting ideas. So, like symbolizing an end, he's specifically referencing a literal end. It's the end of the old administration. It's the beginning of a new one. But that is symbolically linked in that it's the end of the America that was, and the beginning of the America that he is trying to create. He then also adds authority to his stance by saying, "I've sworn before you and Almighty God." That biblical reference and that connection to God, which he uses multiple times, he does to add weight to his perspective. And he uses, like, even just the word God in the way that he uses it, puts emphasis and authority in whatever he's trying to say. So, for example, when he talks about human rights, he has the idea that the belief that the rights of man come not from generosity of the state, but from the hand of God. That's a sentence that's used, and you can't argue with it in the context that he's talking about. It's that there is an authority in that reference, and there is a very real sense of power in that language. He establishes, when he talks about it being an end, he establishes the reasons for that, and he establishes his context, the allusions to post World War II, this idea that the understanding of war, like they were before, the understanding of the atom and nuclear war is actually really important, and he talks very, very, very clearly about what the effects of the war did to that national identity, because he is assessing that national identity and what he wants the national identity to become. So when he says things like, "Let the word go forth from this time and place to friend and fellow alike, the torch has been passed to a new generations of Americans." Okay, so realistically, that generation hasn't actually, like, in the way that we understand a generation, and it's still the same people that did a lot of those things, but he has positioned himself as the beginning of this new idea. Born in this century, tempered by war, disciplined by hard and bitter peace, proud of our ancient heritage, and unwilling to witness and permit the slow undoing of those human rights which the nation has always been committed to, and which we are committed to today at home around the world. That's a really long sentence, and it's because he uses language that builds upon the tension of what he's trying to say, and builds that purpose and authority. And it's very much that cumulative listing, in order to show his perspective, in order to show that this is his manifesto of change, essentially. This is his document that summarizes who he wants America to become. He talks a lot about the state of the world. So those old allies whose cultural, spiritual origins we share. He's talking about colonialism. He's talking about countries like Australia and Canada, and then Britain itself. Because the reasons why he does that is because, again, contextually, he was one of the first presidents where America was very much a superpower, because before that they were an emerging power. Before World War II, they were an emerging power. After World War II, they were a superpower, and he was very much one of the first presidents where this address wasn't just to the people; it was actually to the international community. He is antithesis like a lot. It's one of his favorite things. If you actually can't remember a technique, antithesis is probably one that you should just slip in there. He's direct addresses a lot. So to our sister republic south of the border. So he specifically signals out countries. And he does this because, again, it is that manifesto of who he wants America to be, but also who he hopes to represent America as. So he talks about the United Nations. He talks about communism. And he does this really using a lot of emotive language. He appeals to the American of patriotism using pathos and that emotive language and that emotive appeal. It's that finally those nations who would make themselves an adversary rather than a pledge but request that both sides begin a new quest for peace for the dark powers of destruction. Like that is not low modality. That's actually quite high modality. That is very evocative. He's trying to make sure that there is a clear understanding of stakes in the language that he's using. You don't use words like dark powers of destruction for something that doesn't matter. He's making it very clear that what he's saying matters and has that authority. That's where I'm going to leave this for now. I will make the document available to you and go through more of it later, but that should be enough for now. There will be activities on Google Classroom.